The avalanche of extreme leftist open source projects like Linux distributions and the like, making extreme political statements. I mean, just really just off the rocker, off the rails, off the whatever, extreme political statements continues to unfurl before us. The latest one, and this one is utterly ridiculous, comes from Chimera Linux. The Chimera Linux distribution says that I'm just going to read. I'm going to do this in order here. They say flat out that any effort to put XLibre, the Xorg fork, into Chimera Linux will be rejected on the technical basis of the maintainers of XLibre being, quote, reactionary beeps. Dip S H T S. Dip bleeps. So of course they had to swear. They always have to swear. They just always have to do that. So I took a screenshot of that and I was like, holy heavens, that's crazy. And so I posted that up on X just so people could see it because I like cataloging these things. I feel like someone needs to catalog the history of this particular point in time within open source and BSD and Linux and all just big tech in general and all of the utter wacky insanity that's happening. So I'm doing that. So I'm cataloging it all. And, there got a little bit of a reaction to that. And the Chimera Linux distribution decided, you know what? I'm going to up it a little bit. Because of course they did. They saw that they were getting a little traction, a little free press around their statement of XLibre. So they're like, you know what? Let's go all in on the crazy. Quote, it said their follow-up statement. Just to be clear, this is their quote, given the coverage of the most recent post, which I just told you about, we don't want to be subject to any conspiracy theories arising from that. So I'll just use this opportunity to declare, here we go, that we, Chimera Linux, are definitely here to further woke agenda by turning free software gay. Of course they have to make that statement. Of course they do. Chimera is here to further the woke agenda and turn free software gay. That's their official stance. And here's the... So many Linux distributions are taking this stance. I mean, really. So many Linux distributions are taking the Elementary OS, OpenSUSE, Asahi Linux, etc. stance where they're like, we're the gay Linux. We're the only one. We're the trans Linux and we're the gay Linux. Oh, we're so brave. Look how brave we are. But there's just like a ton of them. And they're all competing over this itty bitty tiny little market share. And if you watch the market share as best as we can measure it, which really isn't that well. But if you look at things like, a little bit of distro watch here and there, some download metrics, some like Google search trends, and you watch other little things over time, every time one of these distributions comes out and makes statements like this, what we see is this very small bump, right? The Lunduke Journal will come out with an article or an episode talking about how that Linux distribution just made some extreme statement, so that distribution gets this little tiny bump. And then immediately following it, it goes way, way down. And you see this happen every time, goes further down than it was before. And it happens every single time. It's a consistent, measurable pattern at this point. And at the same time, when Linux distributions take the exact opposite approach, the opposite thing happens. We see, when Open Mandriva came out and said, you know what? Not only are we not woke, we're like anti-woke. God bless him. Open Mandriva came out and just was anti-woke. And I think this was back in, was it late December, early January? I did a show that here's Open Mandriva, the anti-woke Linux distro. And when you look at the Google search trends and the download numbers and the people signing up for their support forums and everything else, it just spikes through the roof. In fact, the Google search trends spiked so much that it reset everything before that to 0. Right, it was so much higher because Google search trends basically is a percentage, right? The percentage of, like what percentage of your normal traffic are you getting right now, and you can see it go up and down and that sort of thing. And it went up so high after that, and it wasn't because the Lunduke Journal is so massively big. It was because there was a pent-up demand from an absolutely massive number of users who were like, dear Lord, just point me to a Linux distribution that isn't crazy. I'm not asking for much here. I'm just asking for it to not be a woke pile of crazy insanity. That's all I'm asking for. Nothing else. And people saw that and they're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to download this. I don't even, have I ever run Open Mandriva before? Nope. Do I know what I'm getting into? Nope. But I'm going to make this work. So they jumped into it and they started Google searching for, tutorials and forums and everything. And after a time, that traffic spike petered off. But in all of those cases, whenever I've pointed out that, hey, this distribution doesn't seem to be going too woke, it never goes back to as low as it was before. So it has a spike, it settles down a bit, and then it continues on. And then they do something else where I've covered Open Mandriva a couple times now. Same thing each time. Bam, massive spike, comes back down, but it's still higher than it was before. And it's just like ladder stepping up. It's going up the stairs bit by bit and getting more and more traffic, more and more search results, more and more search rankings, et cetera, and it's just going up. And the woke distributions, as they join the massive flood of other woke distributions, are having the opposite thing. It's stepping down. Every single time they keep overall stepping down. And so I don't know why they do that at this point. I mean, I guess they're true believers. Wokeness is a religion, so they kind of treat it as their faith. It's sort of like a religious cult sort of thing, and so they have to declare the wokeness. But man, is it just a bad strategy for building excitement around a piece of software or an operating system. There's a limited market for people who are out there saying, I want to find a good operating system and I want it to be open source, but the most important thing to me is that they are trying to turn free software gay and they're pro-trans and they declare themselves as woke. That's the most important thing to me. I mean, that's a very small market. It exists for sure, but it is really, really, really small. And so the more distributions that jump into this, every time they get praised by all the other people who love that sort of thing. They're like, yes, that's so great. Yes, Queen, good job. You're so good. And then over time, less and less people use it because all the normal people got driven away. And by normal, I'm not saying right wing. I'm saying people who are right, center, and left, but not weird extreme left, right? It's pretty much the entirety of everyone who's leftist politically and everyone who's centrist and everyone who's right-leaning who are all like, yeah, this is getting weird. I just want a really good operating system. I would prefer one that didn't discriminate. That would be great. So anyway, I don't know why Chimera is doing this, but they are. Currently, Chimera is ranked on DistroWatch at place number 57, right in between. They're in between Xubuntu, Xubuntu, and Peppermint, and right below them, Rhino and Bodhi and Dragon OS and a couple of other ones. So they're on the board, but they're not exactly, shooting up the charts right now. Now the response to, Chimera coming out and saying these sorts of things is predictable. A lot of people posting emojis and pictures of cartoon anime people who have been spliced with kitty cats with rainbows in the background and things like that. But other people saying, hell yeah, and that's my kind of messaging. Let's trans the FOSS. It's trans, free, and open source software, said one person who had a trans check mark and another flag check mark and something else, and a mask, because you gotta wear a face mask in order to be taken seriously. Otherwise, they can't let you into the cool kids club. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So then again, the first quote that I quoted from this was about XLibre, right? And how they will not allow XLibre into their Linux distribution based on the basis of the maintainers being, quote, reactionary dip beeps. Okay. And they use the swear word. And this seems to be ongoing. It seems to be ratcheting up where some distributions and operating systems are saying, no, hell no, we won't include XLibre because of political reasons. I just talked about this over the weekend. I think it was Alpine Linux came out and said flat out that they will not allow XLibre specifically because of political reasons. And it's crazy that technical software projects and operating systems would make decisions about things entirely based on politics, but here we are. So the creator of App Images put together a running list that's called "Are We XLibre Yet?" Just kind of recording which distributions are currently packaging or working on packaging right now, like actively working on it, XLibre, the Xorg fork, or have said, no, we won't do it, or it's just unclear. And I just wanted to update you guys on some of this because I think it's interesting. And I think it's interesting from a couple of standpoints. And one of the big ones is whether or not you like any particular display server on a Linux system, right? Whether you like X11 or Wayland or whatever. Put all that aside for a moment. And put aside whatever thoughts you have on, the technical merits of a project or the likelihood of success for a project. Put all that aside for a moment. What I find truly fascinating as we watch all of this unfold is we see people take really hard stands about a display server on political grounds. For example, of the Alpine Linux and Chimera Linux both take a very hard political stance. Fedora Linux is kind of taking both a political and a technical stance, and they're refusing to go down the road of XLibre. Ubuntu and Kubuntu have removed X11 in general because they're with GNOME and KDE, and GNOME and KDE are going anti-X11 in general and sticking to the Wayland thing. It's become this very political thing. And same with Void Linux. Void Linux is like, no, we're not going to do XLibre at all. But Vipnix, OpenMandriva, Gentoo, Devuan, Artix, and Arch in the Arch user repository all are hopping on board the XLibre train, as well as Mac OS. A bunch of you guys are like, what the fart are you talking about? Well, there is something called Xquartz that is an Xorg port over to Mac OS. So you can run X11 software recompiled and running under Mac OS. Well, they're going to be basing on, is from what I can gather, XLibre going forward. So XLibre is really moving in that regard, or at least you can run XLibre, X11 Libre within Xquartz on macOS. I don't know. I don't currently use that, so I don't really know a whole lot. The last time I touched that was probably 10 years ago. But I think it's very cool that is happening. We're seeing lots and lots of action. And what's interesting to me about that is we've seen all that action in just the last week, right? So all that is happening just within the last week, and people taking very, very clear sides. Now, there's a lot of things that are unknown. It looks like we're going to get XLibre on FreeBSD. That's in progress and happening right now. It's unknown about Debian. We have Devuan, which is a fork of Debian without systemd. So we've got that, but unclear about Debian, unclear about Linux Mint, unclear about MX Linux. People asked about MX Linux in their forum, and they locked the topic because it, quote, got out of control. So who knows? OpenBSD is a bit of an unknown because they have their own fork of Xor that they're working with. OpenSUSE, it's listed here as unclear. However, I can tell you flat out that it is hostile. They will not be shipping XLibre. Some of their current and former board members are avidly against it, as are SUSE employees. Several SUSE employees internally are against it for political reasons. I can say that rather definitively, knowing my sources with inside SUSE. And Void Linux, we just don't know at this point. So I mean, that's going to continue onward, and it's going to keep getting crazy because what we've seen over the last week are already significant numbers of Linux distributions taking political stances, like Chimera, who not only took a political stance, but decided as an official statement to swear and name call developers of another project, and then followed it up by saying how they're furthering the woke agenda by turning free software gay. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Thank you to the Lunduke Journal subscribers for allowing me to cover all this stuff. It's crazy. As I read through it all, and I'm getting flooded with emails and direct messages and all sorts of things on this stuff, on Wayland and Xorg and XLibre and all these different distributions, just all day, every day. And as I'm reading through it all, part of me is like, wow, this is a lot of drama. I mean, because it is. It's a ton of drama, and it's a lot of people saying crazy stuff. I mean, like the Chimera Linux people coming out and name calling and swearing. I mean, it's not cool. It's just not cool at all. And so part of me is like, man, I just don't want to cover that. But on the other hand, I think it's important that this be fully cataloged and fully covered for posterity's sake. Right. This information needs to be all pulled together because this is a fairly significant moment in the history of this portion of the computer industry. It just is. And it's fascinating. And I think it will be really fascinating to look at it in hindsight, in the rear view mirror, 2020 armchair quarterback, looking at the play tapes of all this, about how these extreme decisions are being made that are being driven both at the same time by big tech companies, a few specifically like Red Hat and IBM, that are driving people to make these decisions and using the power and influence that they have instilled in major open source organizations and foundations to drive adoption and rejection of software and technologies to suit their needs, while at the very same time, those same decisions are being made on political grounds. And it's interesting to catalog all of that and to try to kind of connect the dots between some of them. Because those two things, the big tech corporations driving things and the political motivations for making those decisions, are not as separate as they seem. So thank you to the Lunduke Journal subscribers for allowing me to cover this, allowing me to gather all this information together, to connect these dots, to do this coverage, both for our usage right now, because someone needs to tell all this stuff, and so that we have that information for the future, just from a historical standpoint. So thank you for allowing me to do that. I could not do this without you. Thank you to all the subscribers. You are amazing. Go to lunduke.com and find out wherever you want to subscribe, for free, for paid, whatever feels good to you. I truly appreciate it all. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes, across this fine and glorious inner tube of ours, I do declare, end broadcast.